Welcome to Leadr Podcast, the ultimate destination for medtech insights, leadership inspiration, and the latest innovation. I'm Stephanie Pliha, founder of Tribe Agency and your host for Leadr Podcast. Welcome to episode 9 of Leadr Podcast. Joining us today is our own senior consultant at Tribe Agency, Alexis McCardle. She's also got a master's in biomedical engineering and is now founder of her own company, Nura. Tune in today as we explore her journey from engineering to entrepreneurship, the creation of Nura out of personal health challenges, and her insights on all things brain, from human design to emotional intelligence to brain patterning and holistic health. Don't miss this inspiring episode. Let's get into it. I am so thrilled to offer up one of my favorite employees with Tribe. Alexis McCardle is our new guest speaker for episode 9. So welcome to you, formerly Alexis Veracruz. I still have you in my phone as Alexis Veracruz, but it's Alexis McCardle. Welcome to Leadr Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So I know we get to see each other on a daily basis, but I'm thrilled to have you today on Leadr because I think there's so many things about you that are super interesting, and I feel like I want to share you with the world. She's not open for hire, so don't try. But that said, I want to talk about how we met and then kind of talk through some things you've got going on in your life. But moreover, let's talk about how we met. Do you want me to start?
Yeah, you start.
Okay. I always have to ponder how we met when I speak to all the guest speakers. It's always some kind of story. But obviously, we both worked at Intuitive. Seems to be a common theme for my last few speakers. But beyond that, I had started with ION to help them launch their robotic bronchoscopy product. And I think, if I recall, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, you might have just blindly reached out to me on email. I know we had worked together in the past when I was on the Da Vinci side, and I think you were even on the Da Vinci side. But when you switched over to ION and I switched over to ION, you had sent me an email just saying, hey, if you're in town, I'd love to meet. I really didn't know you or know what the meeting was going to be about. I don't think, again, you can totally correct me, but I don't think we'd had any interaction. But I loved your fire and I loved that you reached out. So I'm like, sure, we'll meet. I think we met in Glenn Vivos's office, if I recall. And just a brief meeting. You kind of shared with me that you were about to get married and that you had a marketing background and that you were interested in doing more at Intuitive. And I think at the time, I either had no headcount or maybe one headcount that had already been filled for the marketing position. So we just kind of kept talking, and I said, I would love to continue our conversation and blah, blah, blah. That's kind of how I think we met. And then obviously we kept in contact throughout the entire ION journey. And then I'll give part 2, but I'd love to hear, is that how we first met?
Sort of. So we did cross paths on the Da Vinci side. And then when I was on ION, I was doing a lot of the education. So I was an education manager at the time, putting together the sales cast program, the technical cast program. And I actually was part of your training. I don't know if you remember that.
No, I don't. But I kind of blocked most of that training out. So
yeah. So I was actually part of your training, and I was like, I just thought you were so cool. I was like, wow, I want to work for her. And so after, I guess it was just a couple months, I had reached out. I had seen that you were in town. So I was like, we should meet. And then that's when we met up and I had that discussion with you.
Yeah, right. So, and then the rest is kind of history. And then fast forward to Tribe. So I do remember this part. I actually even remember where I was. I was driving in Laguna Beach, and I maybe had 4 or 5 months under my belt with Tribe. I'd had a couple clients at that point, and I remember you had just left Intuitive, just short of me starting Tribe. And so I thought, I don't know what she's doing right now, but I know we always wanted to work together, but just the stars never aligned and we didn't have the headcount. So I called you and I said, do you want to be on the Tribe? And do you want to be a consultant? And blah, blah, blah. And I don't remember how we actually finally figured it out. I think you were pregnant at the time.
Yep, I was
right?
pregnant. Yes, I was pregnant at the time, trying to start my own consulting business at like 7 months pregnant. And I was like, why am I doing this right now?
Yes.
And you're like, hey, I already have a consulting
I was very
business.
convincing. Yeah,
you were very convincing. And the client that you specifically wanted me to work for was just totally in my wheelhouse. So I was like, yeah, this makes a lot more sense than launching my own business right when I'm 7 months pregnant and about to have a baby.
Why I wanted you on the podcast today was really something that you've got going on that I think is a huge passion project for you. But before we get into that, I do want to talk about your background. Tell me and tell the audience, what is your background, educational and just career experience?
Yeah, so I have an undergrad in neuroscience, neuropsychology, and then a master's in biomedical engineering. And after I got my master's, I worked for a couple of different startups in the med device world, specifically a neuroimaging device that I helped be the engineer on, and then also was focused on go-to-market strategy. I was a product manager there, and then a director of operations. And then I went into working at Intuitive as an education manager, where I focused on XI and the X systems, really building out the full education, technical education, clinical. I also focused on hernia as my clinical vertical. An education manager at Intuitive was an interesting role because it was really about being the product manager of an education vertical. So you're figuring out what's the audience needs, you're figuring out the pain points, and you're doing a full launch strategy similar to what you would do with a product. So it made a lot of sense then for me to transition back into product management at Intuitive for the Ion product. So yeah, I've kind of got a mix of the startup world and then the bigger corporate world with Intuitive. And then along the way, I've done some freelance marketing, which allows me to really fit into the consulting world.
When we met and started working together, you started talking about your real passion is to not only work as a consultant for Tribe, but also to launch a company that both you and your husband are super passionate about and that you have a huge amount of experience in. And so I thought, when time permits, I want to highlight this because it was definitely new to me, the entire industry that you're pursuing. I'm learning obviously a lot through you, just kind of talking through the different fundamentals of human design and other areas. But I want to talk about Nura, and I want to talk about the origin story of that, kind of why that's important to you. I know you're early in launching Nura, so this is a good shout out for Nura. Anyone that's listening, hook up with Alexis on LinkedIn. But tell me about that. Tell me about the origin, how you and your husband came up with this, and everything in between.
Yeah, so this has been brewing for a really long time. And I'm sure a lot of people can relate to having an idea and having a passion, but not really knowing how to turn it into a career. And that is kind of where I found myself towards the end of my time at Intuitive. I knew that I really wanted to start this, but I also knew I wanted to make money. So I had the skill set of consulting or doing what I did with upstream and marketing, but I really wanted to focus on my passion. So I was building out or carving a way for me to do both because I do also enjoy the marketing aspect of it. But when you're doing it for yourself, it is challenging. It's really
very
hard.
Different.
Yeah, it is so different because you're second guessing yourself. You are trying to bounce ideas off of who? Like, I have my husband because we're starting it together, but even that is kind of complicated, right? Starting a business with your partner is
I wouldn't advise it, but since you're already well down the road.
Since we're well down the road. So Nura was born, when I was 25, I was diagnosed with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a genetic disorder that causes you to have dislocating joints and just a lot of pain. It almost feels kind of like, it feels like, no, not fibromyalgia, more like arthritis. It's like arthritis. Okay. I was dislocating my shoulder regularly. My fingers would get stuck. And the way that the system was, I was diagnosed and they're like, well, there's no cure. There's nothing you can do. Your symptoms are just going to progress and you're going to be miserable. And I'm like, is that seriously what you guys say? And no, we work in the medical field, so I'm not like dissing on doctors, but it's more so that they don't have the time to really spend with every patient and give a personalized approach to healing. It's kind of like, here's your diagnosis, and now you're on your journey by yourself.
Right.
And that's how I felt. I felt really isolated. And so I started learning a lot of different modalities at that time. And I was working at the brain scanning company, and I was scanning myself every day to kind of see how these different modalities that I was learning was impacting my brain physiology. It was
By the way, is that safe? You've said this a couple times, and I just wanted to find out. Is it safe to put something on your head is it emitting energy to your brain, or is it only receiving?
It's only receiving, but now that I'm a little bit more on the side of like caution of those things, I do wonder, right?
Yeah. I mean, they even say not to give yourself I had an ultrasound machine when I was pregnant with my twins.
Yeah.
And I was constantly wanting to listen to their heart rate, and they were like, don't do that every day. It's
right.
Not great for you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm even weird today about using my cell phone to my ear with different things. So
yeah,
it is like, yeah, I do think about that.
Maybe you should not do it every day.
Yeah.
Maybe every other day.
But technically, in the FDA filing, it is extremely safe and it's not emitting anything. So we think today.
Okay.
Anyway, so I was getting it was a QEEG, so it would measure things like coherence and your brain power and your speed. And I was seeing differences in my coherence, meaning I was seeing differences in how my brain was talking through doing different things like Brainspotting and some neural rewiring practices, whole food nutrition. And within a year, I was symptom free. I didn't have any more issues. And I was like, this is wild. I was told that I was potentially going to be wheelchair bound. And so I just spent the last decade essentially studying different modalities and seeing what parts resonated with me and what I wanted to incorporate into a protocol. And at the same time, my husband got a nutritional therapy practitioner certification, and it's all focused on whole foods nutrition, and he was helping me with that aspect. And so together we just came up with a protocol to really help people who feel like they've been let down by the system, that they don't have any hope, to kind of give them my experience and teach them ways that can easily be integrated into their life without it being super cumbersome. Like, it's small changes that can last a lifetime, and it's really easy to integrate into any routine that you have.
Is it in the mindset realm, or is it more on the science-based side of things?
Both. So, there's a lot in the wellness space these days. And that's part of why I was apprehensive, because it's saturated, right? You hear a lot about wellness, coaching, all of that. And where I feel like I have unique value is I'm very science minded. And so I like to pull in a lot of the science pieces and look into what's new in applied neuroscience and how does that make sense and how does that fit into what I'm doing. So it's kind of a combination. I like to bring the woo-woo and ground it a little bit, because a lot of those concepts are really scientific. It's just that people don't necessarily know what that is.
I want to talk about something that you mentioned.
Sure.
Nothing to do with Nura, but I think it's also very relevant to you as a new business owner. So saturation is up for interpretation. And the reason why I say that, and I know you're just new to social media, but for those that are listening that are on social media and maybe even launching or thinking about launching a company like Nura, like Tribe, or anything in between, you're going to get the sense that it is saturated and everyone's been there and done that. And there is a reason for that. The reason starts with an A and ends with an M. The algorithm will read what you've been Googling, what you've been searching on social media, how you spend your time. Even conversations you're having are being picked up unless you have your entire iPhone or Apple Watch shut off for all outside communication. It is picking up and profiling you. I think there's actually a documentary on this, and I think it's called The Social Experiment or something. I don't know. Anyway, that being said, I had to learn this all too well, because there are a couple of things that I wanted to do, and I started getting fed all the people doing that. It's probably, when you really add it up, 5 people that you're seeing over and over again. But in your mind, you are thinking, oh, I can't enter into this market. It's super saturated. All these people are showing up on my social media, or they're showing up on Google, or a paid ad just came to me where someone's launching the exact same thing. Well, guess what? That's intentional. It's reading your habits and it's feeding you more of that, right? And so it actually gives founders a false sense of saturation. That is just my personal belief, but I feel very convicted in it. And I thought I should tell you, because more than likely that's not the case. More than likely, most people haven't done something like what you're doing. You're just seeing the people that are, and it's a handful. And think about how big this world is. It's massive. Someone told me this back when we were doing courses, and she said, you know, a lot of people think that people have already done this course, or that courses are oversaturated. She's like, but if you look amongst your friends and family and your existing network and find out how many people are pursuing courses, 0% are pursuing courses. So if you use your own profile and your own network to snapshot saturation, it's probably a little bit more realistic and accurate than the algorithm that is feeding you. Anyway, total tangent.
I think that's a really good point, because I mean, that is what kept me from diving in deeply. It's also the imposter syndrome, which I'm sure you've talked about on your podcast before, but it's just feeling confident to be able to take the leap, and then seeing other people doing it. Like, well, how will I be better than them? But the thing is about anyone starting a company, it's the audience that is supposed to find you will find you. It's about you expressing your unique essence, and that's going to pull in exactly who's meant to come across your business. And that is what being in the consulting world has shown me. I'm actually being able to take my own advice and run with it instead of being nervous. But it's also important for me to have you. Like, I've been able to bounce ideas off of you. You even gave me the name Nura. So it's great to have outside people to be able to remind you of these things, even if this is what you do for work. Like, that has been really illuminating for me.
There's always gonna be competition. Welcome it, embrace it, but keep forging ahead. And I'm so glad and proud of you that you have continued to forge ahead, even in the eye of the storm, and, you know, through imposter syndrome, or times where you felt like maybe I shouldn't proceed, or proceed with caution, but just go all in. You know, I'm always a fan of looking at the worst case scenario, and worst case scenario, so you don't do it, but you're going to continue to focus and execute. And I think you've already had your first client, right? Yay.
I know.
That's a win.
Exactly. It's a win. And getting feedback from those clients is going to be so important. And also just not getting tied down into one way specifically. So I know we're going to talk about this later, but how I fold it into my business with the market research is always being open to the feedback. And even if I think this is the way, knowing that you can always change and modify based on what target audience is coming to you and who's finding you. So just getting started, you know that in the beginning, it's going to look different a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, but it's actually taking the leap, because that's how you're going to progress and how you're going to change. You can't stall because you need to be perfect and it needs to look a certain way, because it's going to be totally different in a few years from now. And I've finally come to accepting that, because I've given that advice so many times, and I'm like, oh wait, that's what has been stalling me, as well as this perfectionism aspect in starting a business.
Okay, so back to Nura. So human design, you talked to me about this early on when you were first thinking about starting this company. What is that, and how does that relate, or are you even including that in your analysis? Let's just say I become a client of yours. What is that going to look like?
Yeah, so it really depends on how what you are trying to work on. So I do bring human design in for some people. Some people, it feels far for them, and so it's not something I lead with. But human design is essentially taking your birth date. So it is based on birth date, kind of like astrology, but it's a lot more grounded than astrology. It's not like the sun is here in your whatever house. It's more about what is your energetic imprint? Like, how do you best operate? And what are some some techniques for you to be able to operate in the most efficiently, and you're not working against your nature. So this kind of brings it full circle into the Nura name. So you had the idea, and then I was like, it really fits because it's nature, nurture, neuroscience, and nutrition. And so the using the human design piece is essentially nurturing your nature. It's who are you, how does your energy work best, and how do you not work against yourself? So what is it that, how do you make decisions? How do you best, like what is it that you're trying to accomplish, and how can you do it? And that's what human design really tells you, is here are some ways and some tips and tricks to best utilize your energy so you're not depleted at the end of the day. You're really finding your joy. So I do use it. It's not my primary modality, but I have so many modalities and certifications because I'm someone who loves to learn, and I
neurodivergent is what that's called, right? I think to bring life to human design, and I realize that it's not your biggest conversation that you're having with your Nura patients or your clients, but I think it'll help the audience who maybe is new to this information. And I think because we're on a medtech leadership podcast, I do want to bring up, this is an emerging field, and this is emerging even inside of like the corporate environment or professional societies. I think people are really having to think about how they show up and who they are as a human. Like, I think that was your point of the human design. So to bring life into that, and I don't know if you're even going to remember, quite honestly, I don't, but you, I think, did like a mini human design on me.
I did.
When you were just practicing, and I said, sure, I'll be your guinea pig. Even went to the degree where I actually called the Appleton, Wisconsin, like birth certificate place. I don't know where that was. She said to do the human design on me, she needed to know where I was born and at what time. I don't think it was where I was born, but it was what time specifically.
It was where also. Yeah.
And I'd asked my mom at the time, and she gave me this janky birth certificate that I'd had from birth. And it had like a hole punched right in whether it said AM or PM. And I think you said that mattered, the AM or the PM. And so I literally called to get like the legit, I think it ended up being 6:30 AM. I don't know. I have a copy of it now. But that being said, do you remember what you ended up calling my crazy ass?
Yes. So
what was it?
Your energy type is a generator. So you're a doer. And so that it's just the type of person who's like kind of go, 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 which I mean, it really is you. There is no denying that.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and you're right. It is becoming more, people are looking at it more because everybody shouldn't be put into the same box, because your strengths are going to be different and how you operate is going to be different. And that really ties into Nura too, because our cycles of high functioning, low functioning are different throughout the day. And if you push through breaks, for example, so my personality type, or my energy type rather, is a type that needs a little bit of rest. So I go in high spurts and low spurts. And so if I don't listen to my break times, I can't push through and actually achieve as much as I can in those peak performance hours. So I have to really give myself the downtime and accept that I'm not a generator. I'm not a go, go, go. I can still get the same amount done, but it looks much different. So it's just being sure, like looking into how you're going to operate differently than one another. And also that's really good for organizational behavior.
Yeah.
How do your teams operate? Who are you going to put in charge of this versus this? Because that's their strength. I mean, I can push and go and go and go, but I'm going to be totally depleted and I won't be.
I've seen that in you. I've seen that I've pushed you to the depletion stage a couple of times in the last year, even more recently in the recent past. When we got super busy at the end of the year and the start of this new year. And it's funny because I didn't know that about you, and I had known that about you, I would have probably approached that differently. So I think it's helpful to know that. And when you were talking about it, I was thinking it's kind of like the Myers-Briggs or all the other personality tests that you've taken in the past at corporations. I think human design, if it hasn't already arrived in corporations, I think it should, because I think there's an opportunity to really, my favorite phrase in the world, meet people where they are And then also just help understand how people show up differently. Like you said, I'm a big fan of creating balanced teams. I think I talked about this on one of the former podcasts, but having a team of all doers is actually not good. And you need a balance of people that can actually, and that's how I actually think you and I work really well together. You may disagree, but I do focus on just constantly being on, and trust me, it gets old too. It's not like I just find joy out of being completely on all day long. But I think there are times where I really need to pull in your brain, honestly, and just your ability to just execute and focus and kind of hunker down on data and things that to me are somewhat boring to talk about or even just execute on. So I think there's just it's very relevant to bring into the professional world. And I almost think it could either be an adjunct to the Myers-Briggs or replace Myers-Briggs, because I think that there's so much value in really understanding what makes people tick.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway. And those types of tests, I've always been someone who takes a lot of personality tests. So I'm an ENFP and Myers-Briggs. Like I know all of those things for myself. And for me, human design blew those out of the water. And those, not to say that those aren't useful as well, but there is some bias when you're answering these questions. And for me, nothing aligned more than human design. And so that's why I got certified in it, because I was so fascinated, and I have never had anything so clearly tell me this is how your energy operates. This is why you're feeling depleted, because you're saying things this way. This is the language that you operate best with, and how people can best communicate with you. It's a really useful tool for organizations.
If I were just starting out with you, and I came to you, I'm assuming you do an intake and you find out kind of what I'm struggling with and or what I'm trying to amplify, or, I don't know. You tell me.
Yes. So it is, you do give an intake, and then I would go through to kind of see what areas make the most sense to focus on. And you obviously would have your input as well. But the beginning is kind of like, I like to call it the detox phase, and building the foundation. So you're doing the basic breaking apart of your patterning. So it's a lot about figuring out what your patterns are and that are negative, and then building healthier, stronger patterns. So there is a modality that I'm trained in called Brainspotting, and I've kind of used some foundations of that to build my own, but I like to compare it to having a knot in your back. So when you go to a massage therapist, they find the knot and they push. So that's step one. We're finding the pattern. We're finding the thing in your brain, your mind, the neural pathways that are really connected, and we are starting to break them apart, push them apart. And you do that through an eye positioning, and you also do it through listening to binaural beats, and it's just a release. So it's all about release, and it's probably the most difficult part of what we do, because it's a lot comes up. Things are just flowing out of you, and you're also incorporating some nutritional foundations as well. So it's foundation and release, and then we build new pathways and new patterns. So we're still using binaural beats, but now we're getting into a theta state to create new habits and new neural rewirings. And so that's a really big topic in applied neuroscience right now, is changing your brain. You might hear that, rewiring your brain. It's a big topic these days of how are you rebuilding new habits and neurons that fire together, wire together. So when your brain goes off and you've had an old pattern, well, because it's been so ingrained into your mind for so long, you have those neurons fused, but now that they're broken apart, where can they go now? So now you're building a new pattern, and then it's just kind of sustained. So you're using mindfulness exercises, breathing exercises, EFT tapping. All of those different modalities are just kind of weaved into what we do to make sure that it sticks. And then you can have shortened dedication time. So a lot of times people fall off of these wellness practices because they don't know how to integrate them into their life, because it takes a lot of time. They don't have that time, and they don't want to pay for a coach every day and all that. But once you kind of hit a certain point, then you're just maintaining, and you're listening to these personalized recordings that we do. So kind of using a little bit of hypnosis techniques as well, and neurolinguistics therapy, if people have heard of those modalities.
This is so cool. I have so many notes that I just took. Let's say someone comes to you with addiction, or a history, or even a family history of addiction, or maybe they're struggling currently with addiction. Is that all part of a pattern? Is that something that can be rewired, or is that beyond capability of what we're talking about?
Yeah, it absolutely can be something to address addiction, because addiction is just you finding a coping mechanism. It's a coping strategy for something from your past. And so what it did for me, so I'll just give you an example of how it impacted my EDS, because in your limbic system, physical pain and emotional pain are wired the same. And so I was able to go around my physical pain by addressing some of my core traumas and my core issues that I had from early childhood that I was repatterning over and over again throughout my entire adult life. And so what this process does is you find this core trauma, this core piece, and you just start to chip away at it. So you start from the beginning, and then you see where it has repeated itself throughout your life, and you start to rewrite those stories, and you rewrite how your body reacts to it. So let's say someone triggers you, for example. Someone said something that just, you don't even know why, but you just got so angry and you flipped out, and you didn't even give it a pause or a breath, because your brain, your body is so used to reacting that way to that specific stimulus, to that specific trigger, that you just can't do anything else. And so what our protocol does is it really helps you get to the root cause of, why am I so reactive to this? Because it can seem really small. Like, for example, getting upset with your husband or your wife because they said something so little, or they left a dish in the sink. Well, is it really the dish in the sink, or is it that you feel unheard because you've told them numerous times? And so now you're triggered because they've essentially told you they don't care about you or what you're saying, when that's not really the case. It's just you have this pattern within you, this trauma, this trigger within you that just keeps showing up, and you've never addressed the root cause. And so what we're doing is getting to the root cause, breaking them apart, and then allowing your body, your nervous system, to know you're safe, to give you the space to not react immediately. So what it looks like when you're healing through this process is, oh, now I have a pause in between. I actually am recognizing that I'm doing it. So that's step one. And then you start to build even more space, and even more space to where you can tell yourself, oh, I don't need to react that way right now. And you don't. And that's what I've seen in my own personal life and in the people that I've worked with.
What you just literally outlined is emotional intelligence. So it's interesting that that's woven into this neurospace, because it's everything. You could really have a very low IQ, which was what God gave you, and a very high EQ and thrive. And the opposite can also be the case. You can have a very high IQ and a poor EQ. There's politicians that are questionable in their EQ right now, but that can work against you also. So if you have to look at which one's more important, I would vote for EQ 100% of the time. Now, granted, you have to have a little bit of IQ to be able to walk through the door, but EQ is everything. So if you can help people not only circumvent patterns they're bringing to conversations or the workplace or different scenarios in their life, and then also help them really understand how to allow that space so that they can have conversations and effective communication styles that are more neutral, I think that's a huge benefit. I think when people are firecrackers, it's a sign of weakness, in my opinion. It's my opinion, but it's my podcast. I can have my opinion. But I do think some people think, oh, I need to lay down the hammer and be really super strong about this. And I personally see that as a sign of weakness. The most balanced CEOs are those that can be even keeled, even if they are on fire on the inside. Their response, they are electing to choose strength, and their response is even keeled. Maybe they take 24 hours, maybe they take 7 days. Whenever they can show up without emotion and respond to whatever it is the stimulus was, that is a sign of emotional intelligence. And I'm a huge, huge fan of that. Let's wrap on Nura. So how do people get a hold of you, and how do people sign up if they feel like any of the things we talked about are intriguing to them, or if they even just wanted to have a consult with you? What's the best way for them to find you and your husband right now?
Yep. So we are on Instagram, and we have a website, nuravitality.com, and you can book a call with us and we can discuss, do a 15-minute discovery call. We're also going to be launching some things, some courses throughout the year and some workshops that for groups as well.
Nice. Okay. All right. Well, let's finish our time together and talk about our favorite subject, which is
market research.
and that. So since you mentioned it, we should probably talk about that. But in our pre-call, we were talking about, what are the elements of working with startups, which is our primary population of clients. We could technically work with big pharma or big corporates, and we're happy to, but it's really not our niche. I think our strength is taking the big corporate playbook and applying it to the little guys or the people that are just getting started that maybe are the future big corporates, and taking that in more of a concierge boutique approach versus working with these big establishments. It's really hard to redirect traffic when you're already well down the road. And not to say it's impossible. There's people that are giants that have rebranded or pivoted. I just did a post on this yesterday, but I'm so disappointed with Microsoft's version of PowerPoint and the fact that they really haven't pivoted. They were the leader in deck creation and really the go-to for most companies to use for any presentation. And all of these sleeper cells have been popping up all around as things have just evolved. And if you're not one to stay on technology and the evolution of that, you're going to miss the boat. So with that, that's where Tribe comes into play. We really help people identify their strengths, what they want to be best known for, the foundation of their brand. Most people minimize, oh, I'm too early, I don't need brand. But brand is honestly your company. Aside from the name of your company, your brand is how you show up. And even if you're not, ready for a tagline yet, I'm not even a big fan of taglines, although I have one for Tribe. But I think you always need to have that foundation work done. And so we were talking about how there's this kind of early branding where it's that foundation, mission, vision, unique value proposition. What do you want to be best known for? What's your origin story of the company? What do you ultimately want to accomplish? What's the transformation that you're hoping for? That's that early work that's foundational. And we definitely enjoy working with founders and CEOs on those types of things because I think it forces their hand, just like you and I were talking about with Nura. It forced your hand to really have to think through that and how you want to show up and what do you want to be best known for. So just really carving your niche and focusing on what the foundation is so that when you onboard new employees or you bring on new clients, it's the same experience from the early days to current day. So that's kind of that like phase one brand. Then there's this whole go-to-market effort, which I think you're heavily involved in with our clients, and we can talk through what that looks like. And then there's like the phase two branding, which is more towards the downstream strategy. And so that's all that we do. We do a lot. I'm actually trying to scale down how much we get involved in. But I think something that comes up unanimously almost in every single client. I think there's only been one client in the last year and a half since I've had Tribe that came prepared with their own market research prior to coming to us. Either they came prepared, they had already kind of vetted it a little bit, or they were very much open to the need. But beyond that, most people just want to go towards the shiny penny, which is always digital assets, the logos, the colors, the brand, the fonts, all the things that we do also. But I think if you really don't understand the audience and you haven't done the research, you are going to have a slow and painful death. I hate to break it to you, right?
Yeah, very true. You do need, so the market research for us is just foundational because it is helping us develop your messaging. How do you want to represent your brand to best speak to your audience? What's going to resonate with your audience? And so if you're just guessing at it, like you said, it a lot of times is not going to be successful because you're not using the language to fill the need and address their pain points appropriately. And so you might think you have this really awesome product, and you probably do, but is it filling in the needs that your audience has? Are you speaking to those? Because if you're not, then you're really missing a big part of your market.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I talk about market research so much on every single podcast that I almost have to avoid it because they're just going to say I'm this crazy person that's focused on market research. But let me give you a real life experience. So I've been wanting to launch, there are multiple courses I want to launch from all of my years in corporate and just my overall experience of my career. I know you do too. And I've taken a few courses on launching courses just to make sure I do it right. And one of the overarching pieces of feedback in every course I've taken so far on courses is having market research. And in fact, just recently, I'm in the midst of launching the 30-Day Entrepreneur. And based on research, I may end up changing the name of that. I don't know yet, but it's ultimately the playbook that I have on how I was able to launch Tribe in 30 days. And really just the bootstrap approach of getting your entity name all the way up to your website and the basic fundamentals of being an actual business. And there is a lot that goes into that. There's a good amount that you can put off until after you have your first client, but there's things you have to do in that first 30 days to really be taken seriously and to be open for taking on revenue. And so that's a big deal to me. And I want to do it right. And I want to share that wisdom. I kind of learned it baptism by fire, but I want to share that so other people don't have to. But one of the big things that I've really forced myself to have to back up before I proceed to do is market research, because even though I think I know what that audience wants because I was that audience, I could be blinded by my own opinion. And this is exactly, I think, your point, Alexis. There's founders and engineers and physicians that we work with that are starting with a company and a product that is very close to them and that they realize is something that there's a need, but they're only going off of their own opinion, right? And so you really have to resist the urge to fill in the gaps and fill in the blanks for yourself, you included. Anyone that's launching a company, whether it's a startup or it's a med tech startup or anything in between, you always have to understand and force your hand to really read the leaves, read the tea leaves. You've got to know what the voice of customer is, because that is going to help you understand what's unique and how you're going to show up in that market. What is the big problem that needs to be solved, which seems so obvious, but most people skip over that. We have a client right now, which will be unnamed, but they are skipping ahead with what I think are a lot of areas where maybe we should slow down to focus on, do we really understand this market? Yes, it's an established market. Yes, it's a competitive market. All the more reason to do your market research, because you need to figure out how you can navigate in. Maybe your competitors didn't do their market research, so they're only taking 1% of the market share. And the 90% remaining is untapped because no one's actually identified the voice of customer. I know you and I are very passionate about this. It's only because we are total freaks when it comes to getting it right. And we want to make sure that the messaging that we're giving you and arming you with and putting in your digital assets is going to hit, right? And if you don't know where the target is and what they need to hear and the transformation that they're desiring and the pain and the obstacles that they're experiencing, you're really not going to be able to resonate. The messaging is not going to resonate with them. It's not going to land. It's not that the course I'm taking right now, they talk about instant identity. You want your client or your audience to be able to instantly identify with your solution because you have figured them out. You've dissected them so closely that you understand exactly what they're struggling with, exactly what their desires and the motivations are. And that's for a startup, a small business, and a med tech startup, or any tech startup for that matter. You really have to do the work. So at Tribe, we have big ways to do it. Like we did with one of our customers, we did an audio video version of research. And that was a little bit more painstaking because it took a long time to capture. But I think it was really valuable for the client because they now have sound bites, video and audio sound bites of the voice of customer that they can share with investors, and they can even share in future pitch decks for sales efforts. So I think that was probably the biggest version of it. But I think even starting small, if you're on a budget, market research can be very expensive if done correctly. But if you are on a nimble budget, which most of our clients are, you could even do something like a Google form and just create, which Alexis is great at, creating kind of the top 5 questions that should be asked: the what, the who, the why, and the how, the desires, motivations, and obstacles. We really just want to better understand from your potential audience what they need, how they need it, why they need it, and what are their desires, motivations, and obstacles. So if we can capture that in the market research, then that becomes your vision, your mission, your unique value prop, the problem you're solving, the solution you're offering. It's really tied to everything, right?
Absolutely. And one of the things that you said earlier is that everybody goes after the shiny penny, the logo, the digital assets. And the reason being is that it's this instant gratification, right? They can see it and it's shiny and it's pretty and it's great. But the thing is, the messaging, although you're not seeing the output, you're not seeing the return immediately, the messaging is your core. That is the most important piece. And you'll see it later, but it's playing the long game, knowing that the market research is really positioning you well to be able to put good content on your website and draw in that audience and have that instant identification. That is why it's so important, and why we hit it so hard about talking about this, is because people have a hard time because they're not seeing it immediately. What is the messaging giving me right now? Okay, some words or whatever. But really that is where you're getting your return on investment. That's how you're making the sale. That's how you're drawing the people in.
Yep. It's 100% fact. I mean, when you look at big brands that resonate and people have just instantly identified as a lover of Apple or a lover of Lululemon, or, I use the same brands because they're all the ones that I like, but you identify with them because they've done a really strong job on market research. They have broken down your profile. They are essentially an algorithm in branding, and they have dissected your habits and where you consume information, what are your needs, and they are literally hitting those points in their messaging. So it feels like they're speaking to you, and that is prescriptive branding. And so we can guess, and we're happy to guess, but guessing only gets you kind of that surface level, almost like commercialized approach. Of course, people want better health, or of course they want this, or the generic kind of needs of life. But if you get really specific, if I'm a surgeon or a doctor and I have an interest of solving a problem for a procedure that I haven't had access to, and this company that has a potential solution for that has dissected what has stood in the way of me having a perfect procedure, then they now know exactly how to solve it for me and how to message it to me and people like me. So that's the whole point of prescriptive branding. I won't get too far into that because I want to save time for the last couple of things we wanted to talk about. So go to market is another part of what we do as a brand consultancy. And so a big part of that is Alexis and team. They focus on that upstream strategy, which is really largely her background. But we want to talk about that because we do put that into our brand blueprint. So it is part of your overall messaging package, but it's really specific to go to market. So what does that look like, Alexis?
Yeah, so we really do a competitive analysis and see where your unique value comes in. And then we look at your personas. Who are you speaking to? What are those people's backgrounds? Where are they coming from? So then you can craft your messaging. Another part of it, and this is kind of going a little bit beyond the go-to-market strategy, but sort of not, is talking about road mapping and where you're going to insert certain products, certain features of your product, because you're going to want to have this initial launch, this initial go-to-market, the initial market you're after, and the initial personas. But that, again, evolves over time. And seeing as you're flexible and making edits to your product or your position within the market, you want to know what is the impact effort. So we look at that. So what is going to have the highest impact with the lowest effort, and trying to kind of filter those in and add those things into the strategy of launching, as well as potentially the product itself. So it really is, it's a dynamic process that changes. And so you have in some cases, what we've done in a lot of with our clients is a soft launch, right? So we are just testing the market. We're using the KOLs, these key opinion leaders, and we're seeing how it resonates with them, or what is the feedback, so you can make the changes before you do a broader launch and you're hitting a bigger market, and making sure that you're able to fill the need, and your back end operations can actually keep up. So it's very dynamic, your go-to-market strategy, but I'd say in the beginning, it's really focusing on competition. You're building out and ensuring you have the right unique value prop, and then what Steph is doing is the messaging, the sales strategy, and all of that.
Yeah. So comprehensive, soup to nuts, we meet startups where they are. And we don't just work with medtech, we also work with fintech and other tech companies, or even startups for that matter. So we're kind of broadening our horizons early. First year at Tribe, it was mostly in our wheelhouse of strength, which we all have worked in the medtech industry. And so that's a big part of our expertise and what makes us unique. I think most digital agencies or brand consultancies have maybe a glimmer of experience, if at all. They may have been serving those customers for years and that is their experience, but they haven't actually worked in-house in the companies that they're now serving. So a big part of our background and our unique value prop for Tribe is the fact that all of us have been in big industry and all took that experience and are now replicating it for every client that brings us on. Essentially, they're hiring an outsourced marketing and branding team that can augment before they're ready to have someone physically on their payroll. And so it's been a big opportunity to take our experience where it would normally cost you quite a bit to hire any of us full time, but you're bringing us on a retainer and have the ability to access that insight. We also have on our design team people that have worked at really big operations as well, and bringing that big design perspective to these startup clients that we serve. So it's been super fun. It's been an evolution like all companies. We've really expanded our niche to not only include medtech and robotics, but really to apply to all startups and even beyond medtech at this point. Like I said, we have a fintech company. We've got other companies that are outside of medtech that are working with us. So our approach is really the same, independent of your industry. But I think where we really show up best is in the medtech space, because that is a lot of our experience. Okay, so we do have to unfortunately wrap because we have work to do. We have calls to make, things to do for Tribe and Nura. But I do want to give you the opportunity on a speed round to ask you the final 3 questions that I ask everyone. You're going to have to do it in 30 seconds or less.
Okay.
So number 1, what is the number 1 book that's made a huge impact on you, whether it's a personal book or a professional book that you would recommend to anyone listening?
Oh my God. Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself by Joe Dispenza. Actually, I take that back. Molecules of Emotion by Candace Pert.
Nice. Okay. I would love to get more into that, but we're on a time limit. Okay. We're doing 30 seconds. Okay. Mentor. I'm sure you have several, but who's the one that you want to shout out right now and pay it forward to? Who's made the biggest impact on your life? Right now, it's you. Wow. I just got chills a little bit. Oh, you're so sweet. That's true. That was not rehearsed, by the way. I'm like, and no, this is the time where you tell me it's me. I mean it. I really do mean it. You have been a really great mentor for me and really helped me with starting my business and having the confidence to do it. And so I really appreciate you. Well, that's exciting. By the way, you have been amazing for me. I could not have done this without you, honestly, and continue to not be able to do it without you. You and Tom are like the backbone of Tribe, and I would be devastated if either of you guys weren't here. So keep doing what you're doing, but thank you for that. That was not expected, but thank you. And then the third thing is, what is your superpower? What is the one thing that is natural to you and you think you do better than everyone else? Seeing the best in people. I think I do a really good job at being able to see
beyond what people see for themselves and know what their fire is, what their true self wants, and help them get down to that, which is why I started this business, because I naturally do it anyway, and I want to be able to share that with people.
I love that. I actually couldn't wait to hear what you were going to say, because you have a lot of superpowers. But I do love your sunny disposition. You are far sunnier than I am. I feel like just over years of just being a leader for many, many, many years, I've, seen it all, been there, done that. And oftentimes I can be fairly jaded in my approach to life. I try to be really positive, but I think you are one of the most positive people I've ever been around. So I 100% affirm you for that. I think it's a great strength to have, and I'm sure you're going to serve your clients really well. So like we said, if you want to get in touch with dear Alexis and her husband and Nura, go to nuravitality.com.
That's right.
You can also find her on LinkedIn. You can find us on LinkedIn. You can also go to tribeagency.org. I usually don't plug Tribe, but since we have a Tribe client or consultant on today, she's technically a Tribe client too, but Tribe consultant, I feel like we can weave that in. Anyway, thank you so much for being guest speaker number 9. And with that, you guys have a great day.
All right. Thank you.